She shielded the Mafia boss's daughter from Gunfire. He pulled her close. I owe you everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The rain fell in relentless sheets, hammering against the windshield of the old sedan as Emily gripped the steering wheel tightly. Her knuckles were pale, her heart racing. It had been a long day, one of those days that felt like they would never end. Working at the diner in the middle of downtown had never been easy, especially not on nights like this. The streets were slick with rain, and the city seemed quieter than usual, the usual bustle of nightlife muted under the heavy downpour. Emily just wanted to get home, take a hot shower, and finally get some rest. As she passed the familiar city blocks, she noticed something strange out of the corner of her eye. A black SUV, sleek and intimidating, was parked along the side of the road. It wasn't the car itself that caught her attention. It was the people standing around it. A group of men, all dressed in dark suits, their expressions unreadable. She couldn't make out much, but there was something about them that made her uneasy. Emily's instincts kicked in, and she sped up, her gaze fixed straight ahead. But as she turned the corner onto a quieter street, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Before she could even react, the door to her car was yanked open, and a man in a black suit was standing there, his eyes locked onto hers. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Get in," he said, his voice calm but commanding. Panic surged through Emily's chest, but before she could even think about refusing, a loud, sharp sound rang out, a gunshot. She gasped, looking around in panic, and then she saw her. A young girl, no older than 12, standing in the middle of the street, her eyes wide with fear. Another gunshot echoed in the air, and Emily's heart stopped. Without thinking, she threw open the door and rushed toward the girl, her body acting on pure instinct. She couldn't let her get hurt, not on her watch. As she reached the girl, a bullet whizzed past her ear, narrowly missing. Emily shoved the girl to the ground, shielding her body with her own, as gunfire erupted around them. "Stay down," she whispered urgently, her voice barely audible over the chaos. The men in suits moved toward them, but one man stood still, watching the scene unfold with a dark intensity. His eyes locked onto Emily, and she felt an inexplicable chill run down her spine. This wasn't just any man. He was different. There was power in the way he moved, authority in his every gesture. And then he did something she wasn't expecting. He stepped forward, pulling her close, his arms encircling her in a protective grip. "You saved her," he said, his voice low and steady. "I owe you everything." Emily was still trying to process everything. What had just happened, who this man was, and why he seemed so familiar. But the only thing she knew for sure was that her life had just been turned upside down. The Mafia world was nothing like the quiet life she had known before, and she had just been pulled into its dangerous depths. She had no idea what would happen next, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same. The night was far from over, and the storm outside was nothing compared to the one that was about to hit her life. Little did she know, her journey with the Mafia boss's daughter was only just beginning. Hello everyone. Before we continue with today's story, please make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an exciting new video from us. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us. Your support means everything to us. Let us know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's dive right back into the story. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time Emily and the young girl, who she now knew was named Sofia, found themselves hidden in a small alley behind a rundown building. The chaos of gunfire had stopped, but the tension in the air was palpable. Emily's heart was still racing, her adrenaline still pumping through her veins. She had no idea how she had ended up in this situation, but the moment she pulled Sofia down and shielded her from the bullets, she felt something shift inside her. A new sense of purpose had ignited. As the minutes passed, the man who had pulled her close, the one who had saved both of them, finally spoke. His voice was smooth, commanding, yet filled with a strange undercurrent of something else, something she couldn't quite place. "You saved her life," he said, his eyes locked onto hers. "I owe you everything." Emily's breath caught. She had no idea who this man was, but the sheer intensity in his gaze sent a chill down her spine. He didn't look like any ordinary person. His tailored suit, dark and immaculate despite the rain, screamed wealth and power. But it wasn't just that. It was the way he carried himself, as if the world was his to control. He was a mafia boss, that much was clear. His name, as she would later find out, was Alessandro Romano, and he was known in the underworld as a man who could move mountains with just a word. But right now, that was the least of Emily's concerns. All she could focus on was Sofia, the young girl who was trembling in her arms, her wide eyes full of fear and confusion. "We need to get you somewhere safe," Alessandro said, glancing at his watch. "You're coming with me." "No," Emily replied, shaking her head. "I don't want anything to do with this world. I just want to make sure she's okay." Her voice was shaky, but there was a fierce determination behind it. The last thing she wanted was to get involved in this dangerous life, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was now entangled in something far bigger than herself. Alessandro's lips curled into a small smile, though there was nothing warm about it. "I'm not asking you," he said coldly, his tone unyielding. "You don't have a choice." Before she could protest further, two of his men stepped forward. They were both large, wearing black suits and looking as though they could snap a person in half with their bare hands. They flanked Emily and Sofia, ensuring they couldn't go anywhere. "Don't worry," Alessandro continued, his voice softer now, almost comforting. "We're not going to hurt you. We just need to make sure you're safe. And I can't do that if you're out here in the open." Emily glanced at Sofia, who was still clinging to her, eyes darting nervously between her and the men. She didn't have time to argue. She knew the danger they were in. But something in her gut told her that the danger wasn't over yet. It had only just begun. As they made their way to a sleek black SUV waiting at the end of the alley, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that everything she had known had just been ripped away from her. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing was certain. Her life was no longer her own. She had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. The doors to the SUV opened, and Alessandro motioned for them to get in. "We're going to my estate," he said as Emily hesitated. "I'll explain everything there." She didn't argue. What other choice did she have? As the SUV pulled away from the alley and into the rain-soaked streets, Emily couldn't help but wonder what the future held. She had just stepped into a world of shadows, a world where power and danger lurked around every corner. And the only thing she knew for sure was that she was in deeper than she had ever imagined. Hello everyone. Before we continue with today's story, please make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an exciting new video from us. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us. Your support means everything to us. Let us know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's dive right back into the story. The car ride to Alessandro's estate was quiet, too quiet. Emily stared out of the window, watching the dark city lights blur as the SUV sped down the rain-soaked streets. Sofia was curled up beside her, still trembling, her small hand gripping Emily's sleeve. The events of the past few hours felt surreal, like a dream Emily couldn't wake up from. One minute, she was just a regular woman, working in a diner, going home after a long shift. The next, she was caught in the crossfire of a mafia war, saving a mafia boss's daughter and being swept into his world. Alessandro sat across from them, his expression unreadable. His eyes occasionally flicked toward Emily, as if assessing her, calculating his next move. Emily could feel the tension in the air. The weight of his gaze made her uncomfortable, but she couldn't deny that something about him was magnetic. His presence was commanding, undeniable. He had a way of making the world seem small, as if he controlled everything around him. But despite the power he exuded, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't entirely cold. There was something beneath the surface, a flicker of humanity that seemed out of place in the ruthless world he inhabited. The car finally turned down a long, private driveway. Tall gates rose up ahead, flanked by stone walls. As they passed through, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. This was no ordinary mansion. This was a fortress. The SUV rolled to a stop in front of the grand estate, and Alessandro stepped out first, followed by his two men. Emily hesitated, her hand still on Sofia's. The young girl was too quiet, too withdrawn. Emily didn't want to leave her side, but she had no choice. Alessandro was waiting for them at the door, his expression unreadable. "Welcome to my home," he said, his voice smooth but with an edge of authority. Emily glanced around, taking in the opulence of the estate. Marble floors gleamed under the soft glow of chandeliers, and priceless paintings adorned the walls. It felt like stepping into another world, one far removed from the grimy city streets she was used to. "This is your home now," Alessandro continued, his eyes locking onto hers. "You're safe here." Emily didn't respond right away. She wasn't sure what to say. Part of her wanted to argue, to refuse to be a part of this dangerous world, but she knew she didn't have that luxury. She had saved Sofia's life, and now she was bound to this world by that very act. "What happens now?" Emily finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alessandro looked at her for a moment, his gaze cold and calculating. "Now, we keep you safe," he said simply, "and we deal with the people who tried to hurt my daughter." Emily's stomach twisted. She had no idea what she was getting herself into, but one thing was clear, her life was no longer her own. As they were led through the grand halls, Emily tried to make sense of everything. She had saved Sofia, but why had Alessandro brought her here? Was it just because she had protected his daughter? Or was there something more to it? She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that Alessandro's men were studying her every move. It was clear she was just a pawn in their world, a world where power, wealth, and loyalty ruled everything. The door to a grand dining room opened, revealing a long table set for dinner. A few people were already seated, including a tall man with graying hair, sharp features, and a cold, calculating gaze. He looked like someone who had spent years in the shadows, making deals and running things from behind the scenes. "This is Marco," Alessandro introduced, his voice firm. "He handles most of the operations." Marco nodded at Emily, his eyes flicking to Sofia, who was still standing silently by Emily's side. The tension in the room was palpable. Emily could feel the weight of their gazes, the unspoken expectations. She was an outsider here, a stranger in a world she didn't understand. As she took a seat, the reality of the situation began to set in. She wasn't just in danger. She was in a world she couldn't escape from. Alessandro's words echoed in her mind. "You're safe here." But safe from what? And for how long? She didn't know. What she did know was that she had made a decision, one that couldn't be undone. She had protected Sofia, and now she was in deep. The dinner passed in silence, the food barely touched. Emily barely noticed it. Her mind was consumed with thoughts of what came next. What was her role in all of this? What would Alessandro expect from her now? Her thoughts were interrupted when Alessandro stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You'll stay here tonight," he said. "We have much to discuss, and you need rest. Tomorrow, we'll begin to address the issues at hand." Emily stood as well, feeling a strange mix of fear and defiance rise within her. "What about Sofia?" she asked. Alessandro's expression softened, just slightly. "She's safe. I'll take care of her. You have my word." Emily nodded, but inside, she wasn't so sure. There was too much she didn't understand about Alessandro's world, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could trust him. The next few days would reveal more than she could imagine, about him, about Sofia, and about herself. Hello everyone. Before we continue with today's story, please make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an exciting new video from us. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us. Your support means everything to us. Let us know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's dive right back into the story. The following morning, Emily woke up in a large, unfamiliar room. The bed was soft, too soft compared to the old mattress she was used to in her small apartment. The walls were a deep shade of midnight blue, decorated with antique paintings she could only dream of affording. The sunlight poured through the large windows, casting a golden glow over everything. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. She wasn't sure why she hadn't left yet. The idea of leaving felt wrong, like betraying Sofia. She had already saved the girl's life once. Would leaving her now make it worse? She didn't have any answers, and she wasn't sure she wanted to. She heard the sound of footsteps outside her door and froze. She knew who it was without needing to see him. Alessandro. She had spent the entire night wondering about him, about what kind of man he really was. On the surface, he was cold and ruthless, a mafia boss who commanded respect with nothing more than a glance. But there was something beneath that. Something in the way he'd pulled her close the night before. She had seen it in his eyes, an emotion that didn't belong in his world. Care. Was that possible? She wasn't sure, but she wasn't going to find out. She wasn't in this for him. Her duty was to Sofia, to protect her, and to figure out how to get out of this world before it swallowed her whole. The door opened, and Alessandro stepped inside, his expression unreadable. His black suit, tailored to perfection, still looked fresh even after a long night. His dark eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. He simply studied her. "Good morning," he said at last, his voice smooth and low, like the calm before a storm. Emily didn't respond right away. She wasn't ready to let her guard down. "Not yet. I trust you slept well?" he continued, his gaze still piercing. Emily nodded, unsure of what else to say. "What do you want from me?" she finally asked, the words leaving her mouth before she could stop them. Alessandro's lips twitched into a faint smile, but there was no humor in it. "Nothing," he replied. "Not yet, anyway." His words hung in the air between them. She wasn't sure if she believed him. There was always something more in this world. "You saved my daughter," he said, his tone shifting slightly. "That doesn't go unnoticed. I don't forget things like that." Emily swallowed hard. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because she's just a kid, and no one should have to go through what she almost did." Alessandro's expression softened ever so slightly, but it was gone in an instant. "I know," he said quietly. "I'm not asking for gratitude, Emily. I'm simply saying that your actions won't be forgotten. Not by me, and not by anyone who matters." Emily's heart skipped a beat at the sound of her name coming from his lips. She quickly shoved that feeling aside. This was not about her. This was about Sofia, and keeping her safe. "What happens now?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Alessandro took a step closer to the bed, his presence overwhelming. "You stay here with us. You're not leaving until I know you're safe. It's the least I can do after what you did for Sofia." Emily wanted to argue, to demand answers. But the truth was, she didn't have anywhere to go. She had no family, no other life outside this. The thought of leaving Sofia behind made her feel sick, and she couldn't trust the city anymore. She had already crossed into this world, and leaving wasn't an option. Alessandro wasn't giving her a choice anyway. "I'm not asking you to stay because I want you here," he said, his voice suddenly colder. "But because it's safer for you. Those men, the ones who tried to kill Sofia, they're not going to stop. And neither will the others who want to get to me through her." He paused, looking her over with an unreadable expression. "If you stay, you'll be protected. But if you leave, you'll be exposed. The choice is yours." The weight of his words pressed down on her chest. She didn't want to be a part of this world, but she couldn't deny that it was dangerous. And Sofia needed her. "What about Sofia?" Emily finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's my priority," Alessandro said firmly. "You're here to help keep her safe, Emily. I won't let anyone touch her." He paused, studying her carefully. "And I'll make sure no one touches you, either." Emily didn't know what to say. His words were almost comforting, but they also felt like a trap. A trap she had already stepped into, with no way out. Alessandro turned to leave, but then glanced over his shoulder. "Breakfast will be served in a few minutes. You can join us when you're ready." He left the room without another word, the door closing softly behind him. Emily sat in silence, her mind racing. She was in a world she didn't understand, surrounded by danger she couldn't control. But one thing was clear, she was here now. And she was going to protect Sofia, no matter what it took. Hello everyone. Before we continue with today's story, please make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an exciting new video from us. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us. Your support means everything to us. Let us know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's dive right back into the story. The following morning was a blur for Emily. She had hardly slept a wink, her mind still reeling from everything that had happened. She had saved Sofia's life, but in doing so, she had stepped into a world of danger, a world she didn't understand. Alessandro's words still echoed in her head. Asterisk, you're not leaving until I know you're safe. Asterisk, she didn't have a choice. No matter how much she wanted to get away, she was stuck in this world now. But as much as she hated to admit it, there was something oddly comforting about being under Alessandro's protection. He was dangerous, that much was clear. But there was a part of him that seemed to care, even if he didn't show it in the usual way. He had saved Sofia, and now, he was keeping them both under his roof, a roof that felt more like a prison than a sanctuary. The sound of a soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. She looked up, her heart skipping a beat. Sofia. The young girl hadn't said much since they arrived at Alessandro's mansion the night before, but Emily could see the fear in her eyes. She had been through so much already. She deserves better, Emily thought to herself. Come in, Emily called softly. The door creaked open, and Sofia entered, her small frame barely visible in the doorway. Her eyes were downcast, avoiding Emily's gaze. Hey, are you okay? Emily asked, standing up and walking over to her. Sofia nodded silently, but didn't speak. Emily sighed, kneeling down to her level. It's going to be okay, she said gently, placing a hand on Sofia's shoulder. Sofia finally looked up at her, and Emily saw a flash of fear in her eyes. He'll protect you, I promise. Sofia didn't respond, but Emily could see that she was still struggling with the events that had happened. How could a little girl like her have to go through all of this? Emily thought, her heart aching for her. Do you want to talk about it? Emily asked. Sofia hesitated for a moment, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke. I'm scared. I don't want to be here. Emily's heart broke at the words. She couldn't blame Sofia for feeling that way. This world, this mansion, was foreign to both of them. It wasn't a place for a child to grow up, not a place where she could feel safe. But they didn't have a choice. I know it's scary, Emily said, pulling Sofia into a gentle hug. But you're not alone. I'm here, and Alessandro, he'll keep us safe. Sofia nodded into Emily's shoulder, but Emily could feel the tension still in her body. They both needed time to adjust, to understand their new reality. Emily pulled back, smiling as best she could to reassure the girl. Come on, let's go have breakfast. You're going to need some energy. Today. Sofia gave a small nod, and the two of them made their way downstairs. The mansion was just as grand as the night before, its marble floors gleaming in the early morning light. As they walked down the hall, two of Alessandro's men passed them, giving a silent nod as they moved past. They were everywhere. It wasn't just Alessandro who kept a close eye on them. It was his entire team, a network of guards, people who worked for him, all watching, all waiting. It made Emily feel like a prisoner in a gilded cage. As they reached the dining room, Emily saw Alessandro sitting at the head of the table, his usual cold demeanor in place. He was reading something on his phone, but looked up as they entered. Good morning, he said with a nod, his voice low and authoritative. Sofia hesitated, then moved to sit next to Emily. The two of them took their seats, and a few moments later, a servant appeared to serve breakfast, freshly made pancakes, fruit, and coffee. The atmosphere was tense. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, even now. She knew that Alessandro's life wasn't as simple as it seemed. There was danger lurking everywhere, and she was now part of that danger. But for Sofia's sake, she would play along, at least for now. As the meal continued, Alessandro didn't speak much, his attention focused on the documents in front of him. Emily wanted to ask him about the threats he had mentioned, the people who were after them, but she didn't know how to bring it up. How could she ask him to explain everything when he had barely said anything at all? It wasn't until breakfast was over that he finally spoke again, his eyes turning toward Emily and Sofia. We need to talk, he said, his voice firm. There's a lot at stake here, and I need to make sure you both understand what you're dealing with. Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. What was he going to say? What did he want from her? What do you mean? She asked cautiously. Alessandro's gaze hardened, but there was something in his eyes, something almost protective. The people who are after Sofia, they won't stop. I need you both to stay out of sight for a while. We have a plan, but it'll take time. Are you prepared for that? Emily met his gaze, trying to steady her nerves. She didn't know what the future held, but for Sofia's sake, she would endure whatever came next. I'll do whatever it takes to keep her safe, she said, her voice steady despite the anxiety coursing through her. Alessandro studied her for a moment before nodding. Good. You're more important in this than you realize. Both of you are. Emily didn't know what that meant, but one thing was clear. She was deeper into this world than she had ever imagined. And there was no turning back now. Hello everyone. Before we continue with today's story, please make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an exciting new video from us. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us. Your support means everything to us. Let us know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's dive right back into the story. The days following the breakfast conversation were filled with silence and uncertainty. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Alessandro had been kind enough to provide them with shelter, but his promises of safety didn't come without a price. Every corner of the mansion was guarded, every hallway monitored by his men. It was a life she had never known, one that made her feel both sheltered and imprisoned at the same time. She had tried to keep a sense of normalcy for Sofia. The little girl was still quiet, withdrawn, and rarely spoke unless spoken to. Emily had tried to talk to her, to reassure her, but there was a distant look in Sofia's eyes that made her heart ache. Emily couldn't even begin to imagine the horrors Sofia had endured before they met. The world she had been thrust into wasn't one any child should have to experience. One evening, as Emily was sitting in the lavish living room, trying to read through some paperwork Alessandro had handed her, details about his business, his rivals, his plans, she heard footsteps approaching. She didn't have to look up to know who it was. Alessandro's presence always seemed to fill a room before he even entered it. "You're busy," he remarked, his voice low but deliberate as he entered the room. Emily glanced up, her eyes meeting his for a brief moment. "I'm just trying to understand what I've gotten myself into," she replied, her voice calm, but with an underlying tension she couldn't hide. Alessandro didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked toward the window, his back to her as he looked out over the estate. "You should know, Emily," he said after a pause. "This world doesn't stop. My enemies don't rest. If you want to keep Sofia safe, you have to be prepared to live with that reality." Emily set the paperwork aside, standing up to face him. "I'm already in this. I just want to know how long this is going to last. How long will we have to hide here?" Alessandro turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "Until it's safe. Until I can make sure no one will come after you or Sofia again." "And you can do that?" Emily asked, a trace of disbelief in her voice. "I've been doing this for a long time," Alessandro replied, his voice steady. "I know how to deal with threats." There was a coldness in his words that sent a shiver down Emily's spine. She had no doubt that he was capable of handling his business. But it was hard for her to reconcile the man standing in front of her, the man who had just promised her safety, with the one who lived a life surrounded by violence and danger. She couldn't stay in his world forever. "I'm not asking for much," Emily said, her voice quieter now. "I just want to be able to protect Sofia, and I want to make sure she's okay." Alessandro took a step toward her, his gaze softening just slightly. "You're doing everything you can. But you need to understand, Sofia's life is tied to mine. Whoever is after her is also after me. It's not something I can change, no matter how much I wish I could." Emily nodded slowly, absorbing his words. She had known from the beginning that this wasn't going to be easy. But now, she understood the gravity of the situation. Alessandro wasn't just protecting Sofia. He was protecting himself, and anyone connected to him was at risk. She had no idea how much longer they would have to stay hidden, but as the days passed, it became increasingly clear that she wasn't just an observer in this dangerous world. She was a part of it now. The next few days were filled with more meetings, more discussions about how to handle the threats against them. Emily learned that the Mafia boss was far more than just a powerful figure in the city. He was part of a much larger operation, one that spanned beyond just the streets of Manhattan. She wasn't sure whether she should feel relieved or terrified by his connections, but she knew one thing for certain. If she stayed, she would be learning more than she ever thought possible. One afternoon, as Emily walked through the sprawling gardens behind the mansion, she heard footsteps approaching. She turned to find Sofia walking toward her, her small figure barely visible against the greenery. She had a small bouquet of flowers in her hands, looking up at Emily with a shy smile. "For you," Sofia said, offering the flowers. Emily smiled warmly. kneeling down to accept the gift. "Thank you, Sofia. They're beautiful." Sofia nodded, her eyes wide as she studied Emily. "Are we going to stay here forever?" she asked, her voice small but filled with uncertainty. Emily's heart ached at the question. She didn't have an answer. "I don't know, sweetie," she replied softly. "But I promise we'll be okay. I'll make sure of it." Sofia looked up at her, and for the first time, Emily saw a glimmer of hope in the little girl's eyes. Maybe they weren't completely alone in this after all. As the days turned into weeks, Emily continued to adapt to her new life in the mansion. She still didn't trust Alessandro fully, but she couldn't deny that he was doing everything he could to keep them safe. It wasn't easy, and the danger was always looming, but for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like they might actually have a chance. Maybe it wasn't the life she had planned, but it was the one she had to live now, and she would do whatever it took to protect Sofia, no matter the cost. Hello everyone. Before we continue with today's story, please make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an exciting new video from us. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us. Your support means everything to us. Let us know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's dive right back into the story. The next few days passed in a blur of tension and uncertainty. Emily had never been this close to the Mafia world before, but now she was living right in the heart of it, surrounded by people who could take down anyone without a second thought. Every day was a reminder of how dangerous this place really was. Alessandro's estate felt like a fortress, and every inch of it seemed to be under constant surveillance. The mansion's security was unlike anything Emily had ever seen before. Guards at every entrance, cameras in every corner. Even the walls seemed to have ears. Despite the fact that she and Sofia were technically safe, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the threat was never far away. Each morning, they were escorted to different rooms by Alessandro's men. Sofia stayed close to her, her small hand gripping Emily's sleeve as they walked the vast hallways. Emily had tried to keep things as normal as possible for the young girl, but it was hard when the world around them felt so different from what they had known. Emily knew the only way to make Sofia feel safe was to be the rock she needed, but even Emily had moments when she felt uncertain. Despite all of Alessandro's assurances, the fear lingered. One afternoon, after a quiet lunch, Emily was sitting in one of the mansion's many rooms, trying to distract herself with a book. It wasn't much, but it helped take her mind off everything. She heard footsteps approaching, and without looking up, she knew who it was. Alessandro. His presence filled the room before he even spoke. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, her voice firm, but her gaze never leaving the pages. "I'm not here to make things harder for you, Emily," Alessandro replied, his voice steady, but with an edge of something she couldn't quite place. She closed the book and looked at him, her eyes meeting his. "Then why are you here?" He moved closer, his expression unreadable. "There's been a situation," he said, his tone shifting to one of seriousness. Emily felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "What do you mean, a situation?" Alessandro paused for a moment before answering. "One of the people I'm dealing with has made a move, and it's only a matter of time before they try something again." Emily's heart began to race. She had a sinking feeling in her chest, as though she was walking into something far more dangerous than she could imagine. She wanted to ask more questions, but the words caught in her throat. "You'll be fine, but you need to stay close," Alessandro continued, his voice softer now, almost reassuring. "Stay close to who?" Emily asked, her voice shaky. Alessandro didn't answer right away. He looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable, as if measuring her response. "To me," he finally said. Emily froze. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. "To me." She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She wasn't sure what she expected from Alessandro, but that certainly wasn't it. He saw the confusion in her eyes and stepped closer, as if to make his intentions clearer. "I told you before, Emily. You and Sofia are under my protection. But this world I live in isn't simple. And sometimes, the only way to survive is to stay close to the people who can help you." Emily's mind raced. Stay close to him? She didn't know if she could. She wasn't sure if she even wanted to. The thought of becoming part of his world, of getting tangled in the web of lies and violence, terrified her. But she couldn't ignore the reality that she and Sofia were already in this. They had already crossed a line, and there was no going back. "I don't want to be a part of this," she said quietly, her voice trembling. Alessandro's gaze softened, just slightly. "I'm not asking you to be a part of it," he said. "I'm asking you to survive it. And for that, you need to trust me." Emily didn't know if she could trust him, but she knew that trusting him might be the only way to keep Sofia safe. She had already seen the lengths Alessandro was willing to go to protect his daughter, and she had no doubt he would do the same for them, if it came to that. The question was, how much of herself was she willing to sacrifice to survive? "I don't know if I can trust you," Emily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Alessandro didn't flinch at her words. Instead, he stepped back, his gaze unwavering. "I don't expect you to," he said, his voice cool and controlled. "But you will in time. You'll see." With that, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts. She sat there for a long time, processing everything that had happened. The weight of the decision she was facing pressed down on her. She was stuck in a world she didn't understand, and the longer she stayed, the more she felt herself becoming a part of it. But Sofia needed her. Sofia depended on her, and Emily would do whatever it took to keep her safe, even if it meant putting her trust in a man like Alessandro. The door closed softly behind him, and Emily stood up, her mind made up. She had no idea what was coming next, but she was ready to face it. For Sofia. For herself. Hello everyone. Before we continue with today's story, please make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an exciting new video from us. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us. Your support means everything to us. Let us know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's dive right back into the story. The following days passed in a haze, a blur of unfamiliar routines and constant surveillance. Emily had begun to realize the extent of the world she had stepped into. Alessandro's estate was no longer just a shelter. It was a fortress, and she was a prisoner within it, though her chains were invisible. The staff, the security guards, even the walls themselves seemed to be watching, waiting for something to happen. The constant tension in the air was thick enough to slice through. Sofia had grown quieter, more withdrawn as the days wore on. Emily did her best to comfort her, but it was hard when both of them were trapped in the same storm. The mansion, beautiful as it was, felt like a gilded cage. And outside that cage, the threats were still very real. Alessandro hadn't told her much more about the danger they were in, but she could feel it lurking just beyond the walls. There were whispers, things he kept to himself, but Emily knew better than to ask. She had seen the way his eyes would harden when he spoke about his enemies. She had seen the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his men would move with purpose whenever a new report came in. The Mafia world wasn't just a series of deals and alliances. It was a constant game of survival. And now, Emily was a part of it. Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard the sound of footsteps outside her door. She looked up, already knowing who it was. Alessandro, the man she was trying to avoid, but the one who seemed to be everywhere at once. He stepped inside without waiting for her response, his presence filling the room like a shadow. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low, almost too calm. Emily closed the book she had been pretending to read and looked at him, her heart racing. "About what?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Alessandro didn't answer right away. He moved toward the window, looking out at the sprawling grounds of the estate. "The situation is escalating," he said, his back still to her. "My enemies are getting bolder. It's only a matter of time before they make another move." Emily felt her stomach tighten. The words sent a chill down her spine. "What do you want me to do about it?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Alessandro finally turned to face her, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "Stay out of sight. Keep Sofia close. The more they know about you, the more vulnerable you are. The more they know about Sofia, the more dangerous it becomes." Emily nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. She had no choice but to stay hidden. The longer they stayed here, the more they became targets, and she couldn't let Sofia pay the price for her own ignorance. "What about you?" she asked, unable to keep the concern from her voice. "What happens when they come for you?" Alessandro's expression remained cold, unreadable. "I'll handle it," he said simply. "You don't need to worry about me." Emily wanted to argue, to tell him that she couldn't just sit by and watch him put himself in danger, but she knew better. Alessandro didn't need her protection. In his world, he was the one who gave protection, the one who dictated the terms. Still, there was a part of her that couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something from her. Something important. I'm not asking you to stay out of it, he added, his tone softening, just slightly. But I am asking you to trust me. I know how to deal with these things. Emily took a deep breath, her mind racing. The idea of sitting idly by while Alessandro and his men went into battle made her feel helpless. She wasn't used to being a bystander. She wasn't used to feeling so powerless. But the truth was, she didn't have a choice. She was already a part of this world, whether she liked it or not. I'm just trying to keep Sofia safe, she said quietly. Alessandro studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her words. Then he nodded. I know, and I appreciate that. You're stronger than you think. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. It was a side of him she hadn't seen before, one that made her question everything she had assumed about him. But there was still so much she didn't know. So much about this life she was now a part of. Alessandro's gaze softened, just a fraction. Don't worry, Emily, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You and Sofia are safe. I'll make sure of it. As he turned to leave, Emily watched him go, her heart still heavy with uncertainty. She wasn't sure if she could trust him, but she had no other choice. For Sofia's sake, she had to believe in his words, even if they didn't sit well with her. The rest of the day passed in a haze of routine. Emily and Sofia stayed in the rooms, away from the windows, away from the public spaces of the mansion. The staff went about their work, seemingly oblivious to the looming danger. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was coming, that it was just a matter of time before everything exploded. As night fell and the mansion grew quiet, Emily found herself standing by the window, staring out into the darkness. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She wasn't going to let Sofia face it alone. She would do whatever it took to protect her, even if it meant stepping deeper into Alessandro's dangerous world. She only hoped she would be able to survive it. Hello everyone. Before we continue with today's story, please make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an exciting new video from us. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us. Your support means everything to us. Let us know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's dive right back into the story. Days passed, but the tension never seemed to ease. Emily and Sofia had settled into a strange routine in the mansion, one where the luxury and comfort seemed like a farce in the face of the constant danger that loomed just outside. Alessandro had kept his word, so far. The guards, the surveillance, and the hidden threats were always there, just under the surface. There was no escaping it, not for them, not for Sofia, and especially not for her. Emily couldn't stop thinking about the fact that they were caught in a world they didn't belong to, and even though Alessandro promised their safety, Emily wasn't sure she could fully trust him or anyone in his world. Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. She looked up and saw Sofia, the little girl still as quiet as ever, holding a small piece of paper in her hands. What is it, sweetie? Emily asked, kneeling down to her level. Sofia didn't say anything at first, but then she handed Emily the paper. It was a drawing, a simple one, just a sketch of a house with two figures standing in front of it, one much smaller than the other. It's us, Sofia whispered. Emily smiled gently, her heart aching at the innocence of it. It's beautiful, she said softly. Sofia nodded, her eyes looking up at Emily for the first time in days. I want to go home, she said in a small voice. The words hit Emily harder than she expected. Home. What did that even mean now? They had no home to return to. Their world had been turned upside down, and this mansion, no matter how lavish, was just a temporary refuge. Emily couldn't promise Sofia that they would go home. The only thing she could do was protect her, keep her safe, and figure out how to survive in a world she didn't understand. We'll be okay, Emily said, pulling Sofia into a tight hug. I promise. As they pulled apart, the sound of a door opening caught their attention. Alessandro stood in the doorway, his presence filling the space. Sofia, I need to speak with you, he said, his voice calm but firm. Sofia immediately looked up at Emily with a worried expression, and Emily felt a rush of protectiveness. It's okay, Sofia. Go with him, Emily said, forcing a reassuring smile. Sofia hesitated, but after a moment, she nodded and followed Alessandro out of the room. Emily sat down on the edge of the bed, her thoughts swirling. She didn't know what was going on, but she didn't trust Alessandro's intentions. There was something about the way he operated, something that kept her on edge. She had seen how he controlled everything around him, his men, his empire, even Sofia. Emily's heart was heavy as she thought about the little girl and the world she had been thrust into. It wasn't right. None of this was right. She couldn't stay here forever, hiding in this gilded cage while the world outside continued to turn. But what choice did she have? Alessandro had made it clear that leaving wasn't an option. She had been dragged into this life the moment she saved Sofia, and now, there was no escaping it. The sound of footsteps in the hall broke her thoughts. She looked up to see Alessandro returning, this time alone. He closed the door behind him with a soft click and turned to face her. "She's fine," he said, his tone unreadable. "Just wanted to talk to her about the situation." Emily stood up, crossing the room to face him. "What situation?" she asked, her voice tinged with frustration. Alessandro didn't respond right away. Instead, he studied her carefully, as if deciding how much to say. Finally, he spoke. "The situation with my enemies is escalating. The ones who are after Sofia, they know she's under my protection now, and they'll do whatever it takes to get to me." Emily's heart pounded in her chest. "What does that mean for us?" she asked, her voice shaking. Alessandro stepped closer, his eyes locking onto hers. "It means they won't stop until they have what they want. They know Sofia is the key to breaking me, and that's why you're not leaving. You. Stay close to me, Emily, and I'll keep you safe." The words felt like a threat, even if they were meant to comfort. Emily had no doubt that Alessandro could protect them in his world of power and violence, but it came at a cost. She wasn't sure if she was ready to pay that price. "What exactly do you want from me?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. Alessandro paused, studying her for a moment. "I want you to trust me," he said, his voice lower now, almost hesitant. "I know you don't trust me, but I need you to. If we're going to survive this, we have to be a team." Emily shook her head, her thoughts in turmoil. "How can I trust you when everything you've built is based on lies, power, and manipulation?" Alessandro's gaze darkened, his jaw tightening. "Because I'm not lying to you now. I'm telling you the truth. And the truth is, if you leave, you put both you and Sofia at risk. Do you understand that?" Emily met his gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to trust him. But deep down, she knew he was right. There was no leaving this life now. She had already stepped too far into it. "I understand," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Alessandro nodded, his expression softening ever so slightly. "Good," he said. "Now, let's make sure nothing else happens to her." As he turned to leave, Emily's mind raced with questions she wasn't sure she could answer. She had just agreed to something she wasn't fully prepared for. And in that moment, she realized that everything she thought she knew about survival was about to change forever. Hello everyone. Before we continue with today's story, please make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an exciting new video from us. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us. Your support means everything to us. Let us know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's dive right back into the story. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Even with the heavy security surrounding Alessandro's estate, the constant surveillance, and his firm promises of protection, there was still a feeling of unease lingering in the air. Every day, she watched him move through his world, a man who seemed to control everything, from the way his guards stood at attention to the way people in the business world feared him. And yet, there was a part of him that seemed to care, especially when it came to Sofia. Emily had watched the way he treated her, protective yet distant, as though he cared, but was always keeping a part of himself locked away. It was almost like he was afraid to let anyone get too close. She had been trying to adjust, but the danger was always lurking just beneath the surface, never far enough away to feel truly safe. One evening, as the estate settled into its usual quiet, Emily found herself in the garden, staring out at the vast expanse of greenery that surrounded the mansion. The evening air was cool against her skin, and for a moment, she let herself forget the chaos that had brought her here. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, trying to calm the storm inside her. Just as she was about to head back inside, she heard a voice. "I thought I might find you out here." It was Alessandro. She turned to face him, surprised to see him standing there, his figure framed by the dim light of the house. He walked closer, his steps measured, controlled, and as always, his presence filled the space around him. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice smooth, but with an underlying tension that Emily had come to recognize. "No," she replied. "Just needed some air." She met his gaze, searching for any clue as to what he was thinking. "You're worried," Alessandro said, as though reading her mind. "You don't trust me, and I get that." Emily's heart skipped a beat at his words. She had never said it aloud, but it was true. She didn't fully trust him, not yet. "It's not about trust," Emily said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "It's about survival. We're in your world now, and I'm not sure I understand it. I don't know what the next step is, what I'm supposed to do, or what's coming for us." Alessandro's eyes softened just slightly, and for a moment, he seemed almost vulnerable. "I'm doing everything I can to protect you, Emily. I don't know what else to say." Emily shook her head, her frustration building. Words don't mean much when danger's always lurking around the corner. Alessandro took a step closer to her, his gaze steady. "I know you don't see it now, but I'm doing this for you and Sofia. Everything I've done, everything I've built, it's all for this moment. For you too." Emily felt a surge of emotion at his words. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him. But the reality of the situation was too overwhelming. Alessandro had his own world, one filled with violence, betrayal, and ruthless decisions. She had only been in it for a few weeks, and already, she could feel herself getting pulled deeper into it. "I just want to keep Sofia safe," she whispered, almost to herself. Alessandro's expression hardened, and he reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "You will," he said, his voice low but firm. "I promise you that." The moment hung in the air between them, and for the first time since she had arrived, Emily allowed herself to believe him. The sound of a door opening interrupted them, and Emily turned to see Sofia standing in the doorway of the mansion, her small figure looking lost and uncertain. "Sofia," Emily said, her heart aching at the sight of the young girl. "What are you doing up?" I heard voices," Sofia said, her eyes darting between them. "I couldn't sleep." Emily knelt down to her level, smiling gently. "It's okay, sweetie. Why don't you come out here for a while? We'll sit and talk." Sofia hesitated for a moment, but then slowly walked toward Emily, her small hand reaching out. Emily took it, guiding her to the bench where she had been sitting moments before. As they sat, the silence between the three of them was thick, but not uncomfortable. Alessandro stood a few feet away, his hands folded behind his back as he watched them. Emily couldn't help but notice the way he looked at Sofia, his expression softening when their eyes met. It was strange, this quiet dynamic between them. The ruthless Mafia boss, the woman trying to protect the little girl, and the girl who was caught in the middle of it all. They were all in this together now, whether they liked it or not. The minutes passed, and soon the sound of footsteps approaching broke the silence. Emily turned to see two of Alessandro's men walking toward them, their expressions serious. "Mr. Romano," one of them said, his voice low. "We need to talk. There's been a development." Alessandro's gaze darkened, and he nodded, turning to Emily and Sofia. "Stay here," he said. "I'll be back soon." Emily watched as Alessandro walked away with his men, his figure disappearing into the shadows. Sofia nestled closer to Emily, and she wrapped her arms around the little girl. The sense of danger hadn't gone away, but for the first time since they arrived, Emily felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe this could work. Maybe they could make it through this. But deep down, she knew that the storm was far from over. It had only just begun. Hello everyone. Before we continue with today's story, please make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an exciting new video from us. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us. Your support means everything to us. Let us know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's dive right back into the story. The tension in the air had grown unbearable. Emily couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something big was about to happen. She had hoped, in the quiet of the garden and in the comfort of her temporary shelter, that they might find a sense of peace. But peace had never been part of the equation in Alessandro's world. The events of the last few days had made that painfully clear. The mansion, as opulent and secure as it was, now felt like a gilded cage. She couldn't ignore the men in black suits who moved silently through the halls, or the constant whispers and the cold, calculating expressions on the faces of Alessandro's people. Emily's thoughts were interrupted when she heard the sharp sound of a door opening. She turned to see Alessandro entering the room, his dark gaze immediately locking onto hers. There was a new urgency in his steps, something that made her heart race. "It's time," he said simply, his voice steady but edged with something that felt like an impending storm. Emily stood, her stomach dropping. "Time for what?" she asked, already fearing the answer. "They're making their move," Alessandro replied. "My enemies. They know we're here." Emily's pulse quickened. "What do you mean, they know we're here?" Alessandro's jaw tightened, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "I've kept this house hidden for years, Emily," he said, his voice almost regretful. "But the people after me, they're more dangerous than I thought. They found out where we are, and they won't stop until they get what they want." "What do they want?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Me," Alessandro said flatly. "And Sofia. They know she's the key to everything. And now that they know where we are, they'll stop at nothing to get to us." The gravity of his words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. She had been trying to keep Sofia safe, trying to shield her from the chaos, but now it seemed like the danger had reached them. There was no more hiding. Alessandro continued, his voice low but determined. "We have a plan," he said. "But I need you to trust me, Emily. This is about survival now. We need to stick together." "What do we do?" Emily asked, her mind racing. Alessandro's eyes softened, just slightly. "We move to the safe room. It's a secured area, away from the main house. We'll stay there until I handle this. I'll keep Sofia close, and you stay with me." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. The thought of being trapped in a room, hiding while the world outside descended into chaos, felt suffocating. But it was the only option they had. "Okay," Emily said, her voice trembling, but determined. "Let's do it." "Good," Alessandro replied. He motioned to one of his men standing by the door, who immediately stepped forward. "Get them to the safe room." "Now," Alessandro ordered. The man nodded, signaling to Emily and Sofia to follow him. As they walked down the long corridors of the mansion, Emily couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation settling in. She had no idea what was happening outside the walls of the estate, but the sense of danger was palpable. It wasn't just the Mafia world that was after them anymore. It was something darker, something more sinister. They reached the safe room, a cold, sterile-looking space hidden beneath the mansion. The walls were thick, reinforced with layers of steel and concrete, designed to withstand anything. As the door closed behind them with a heavy thud, Emily felt a wave of claustrophobia wash over her. She looked at Sofia, who had stayed unusually quiet, and pulled her close. "It's okay," she whispered, trying to reassure the little girl, though her own heart was pounding in her chest. Sofia nodded silently, her small hand gripping Emily's. Alessandro stood near the door, speaking in low, urgent tones to his men, his back turned to them as he strategized. Emily had never seen him like this, so cold, so calculating. He was a man who always seemed to have control, but now, Emily could see the cracks in that facade. He was worried, and for the first time, she realized that she might be too. The minutes stretched on as the tension in the room grew thicker. Every sound outside the room felt amplified, and Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the walls themselves were closing in on them. Alessandro had promised to keep them safe, but the reality of their situation was setting in. They weren't just hiding, they were waiting for the storm to break. After what felt like an eternity, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Alessandro's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "They're here," he said. "Stay quiet. Stay hidden." Emily's heart raced as she held her breath. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing. Nothing was going to be the same after tonight. The storm was finally here, and they were in the eye of it. The world outside the safe room seemed miles away, and yet it was closing in, inch by inch. As the tension in the air reached its peak, Emily couldn't help but wonder how far Alessandro would go to protect them, and whether the price for their survival would be more than she could bear. The silence in the room was deafening as they waited, knowing that whatever came next would change everything. The storm had come, and there was no turning back now. Hello everyone. Before we continue with today's story, please make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an exciting new video from us. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us. Your support means everything to us. Let us know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's dive right back into the story. The night that followed felt like an eternity. Emily's heart was pounding, the uncertainty of the situation almost unbearable. Inside the cold, sterile safe room, the air felt thick with anticipation. The sounds of movement just outside the door, the low voices of Alessandro's men, all made it clear that something big was happening. Emily held Sofia close, her small frame trembling as she clung to her. She didn't know what to say to comfort the girl anymore. Words felt useless. She was scared too. She kept telling herself that they would get through this, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was teetering on the edge of something irreversible. The silence stretched, and every tick of the clock seemed to echo in her ears. The only sound was the occasional shuffle of footsteps and muffled voices from the hallway. Alessandro had left to deal with the situation, leaving Emily and Sofia in the safe room with a handful of guards stationed outside. Emily couldn't decide whether it was the isolation or the overwhelming fear of what might happen next that made her feel suffocated. She wanted to believe that Alessandro would keep them safe, that he would protect Sofia, but his world was one built on secrets, power, and fear. How could she trust someone who had built such a dangerous empire? The door opened suddenly, and a man stepped inside, his face grim and set with determination. Emily's heart skipped a beat, her protective instinct flaring as she moved instinctively to shield Sofia from view. But it wasn't Alessandro. The man glanced at her and nodded before stepping closer. "Everything's in place," he said in a low voice, his eyes scanning the room. "The perimeter is secure, but they're getting closer. We don't have much time." Emily's stomach twisted at the mention of they. Who were these people? Who were the enemies that had them trapped in this safe room? She opened her mouth to ask, but the man cut her off before she could speak. "Alessandro is handling the main threat. We need to make sure Sofia stays hidden until then." The urgency in his voice left no room for doubt. Emily nodded, trying to keep her composure. But fear gripped her chest. She wasn't used to being this vulnerable. She had always prided herself on being able to handle things on her own. But this was different. She wasn't just protecting herself anymore. She was protecting Sofia, a child who had already seen too much. The man gave a curt nod before turning and leaving, closing the door behind him with a heavy thud. Emily sank back into the chair, her heart still racing. She looked at Sofia, who had been staring blankly at the floor, her face pale. "Sofia," Emily said softly, reaching for her hand. "I need you to stay close to me, okay?" Sofia nodded, but her eyes were distant, like she wasn't really there. Emily's heart ached for her. She could only imagine how much Sofia must have been carrying inside, how many questions she must have had. But there was no time for answers now. Emily needed to keep Sofia safe, and for that, she had to stay calm. The minutes passed like hours, and every sound from outside the door made Emily tense. She kept trying to reassure Sofia, but the silence in the room only seemed to heighten the tension. The air felt thick with fear, as though the walls themselves were closing in. What was happening outside? What was Alessandro dealing with? What had he gotten them into? And most importantly, would they be safe? Emily could feel her anxiety growing by the second. The door opened again, and this time, Alessandro walked in. His expression was grim, but there was something else in his eyes. A flicker of something. Relief, or maybe resignation. He closed the door behind him and locked it, then turned to face them. "It's not over," he said, his voice low but steady. Emily's stomach twisted. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alessandro took a step closer, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. "It means we're not out of the woods yet," he said, his gaze moving to Sofia, who had started to look up at him. "But I've made sure you're safe for now." His words didn't reassure her. They only added to the weight pressing down on her chest. "What do you need us to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear that churned inside her. Alessandro hesitated for a moment, his jaw tightening. "Stay here. Stay hidden. Until it's safe to leave. I'll take care of the rest." Emily nodded slowly, But deep inside, she wasn't so sure. She didn't trust him completely. Not yet. Not after everything that had happened. But she didn't have a choice. They were in this together now, and the only way out was forward. "I'll make sure she's okay," Emily said, her voice softer now, more determined. "You can count on me." Alessandro's expression softened just a fraction, and he gave a nod. "I know you will," he said quietly. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving them alone once more. Emily sat there for a long time, her mind racing. She didn't know how much longer they could stay in hiding. She didn't know if Alessandro's promises would hold up. But one thing was clear, the storm wasn't over. And Emily would do whatever it took to keep Sofia safe, no matter what. The night stretched on, the tension unbearable as they waited for the next move. Emily wasn't sure what would come next, but she knew one thing for sure. They couldn't stay in hiding forever. The danger was still out there, and soon, they would have to face it head on. Hello everyone. Before we continue with today's story, please make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an exciting new video from us. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us. Your support means everything to us. Let us know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's dive right back into the story. The following days blurred together as Emily and Sofia remained in the safe room. Outside, the mansion buzzed with activity, but inside, there was only silence. Alessandro kept his distance, his focus entirely on protecting them. Emily could feel the weight of his promises, but she also felt the suffocating tension that had taken over their lives. Nothing felt certain anymore. The days felt like an endless waiting game, the fear of what might come next always looming. But one night, after what seemed like an eternity, everything changed. Emily had just put Sofia to bed, the little girl finally managing to fall asleep after days of restlessness. Emily sat by the window, her eyes scanning the darkness outside. The world beyond the mansion seemed so far away, yet Emily couldn't escape the feeling that they were still trapped. The silence was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She stood, instinctively moving toward the door, but before she could reach it, it opened. Alessandro entered the room, his eyes tired, but sharp, as usual. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but serious. Emily nodded, her stomach twisting with anxiety. She had been expecting this moment, but she wasn't ready for it. Alessandro closed the door behind him, locking it with a soft click. "They found us," he said, his gaze never leaving hers. Emily's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "They know where we are. My enemies. And they're coming for us tonight." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She had been dreading this moment, but now that it was here, it felt even worse than she could have imagined. "We don't have much time," Alessandro continued, his tone urgent. "I need you to stay close to me and Sofia. And when the time comes, you follow my lead. Do you understand?" Emily nodded, her heart racing. "What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We fight," Alessandro replied simply. Emily's blood ran cold at his words. Fight? How could they fight? They were just two women, one of them a child, trapped in a mansion with no way out. Alessandro must have sensed her fear because he stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "I won't let them get to you," he said, his voice steady, almost comforting. "I promise." His words, meant to reassure, only made her feel more trapped. There was no escaping this world. They couldn't run. They couldn't hide. The only choice was to face whatever was coming head on. They didn't have long to prepare. Alessandro's men were already moving into position, securing the perimeter, getting ready for the confrontation that would determine everything. The mansion, once a symbol of safety, now felt like a battleground. Emily's mind raced as she thought about Sofia. What if something happened to them? What if they didn't make it out of this? She couldn't bear the thought of losing the little girl who had come to rely on her. She needed to keep her safe. They needed to survive this. "I'll protect you," she whispered to Sofia as she hugged the girl tight, not knowing what was going to happen next. The minutes dragged on, the sound of Alessandro's men moving through the halls growing louder. Emily could feel the adrenaline surging in her veins, the fear and anticipation building with every passing second. And then, the door opened. The sound of gunshots echoed through the mansion, and everything seemed to explode in a rush of chaos. Emily's heart stopped as the door slammed shut, the tension finally breaking as the fight began. "Stay here, both of you," Alessandro ordered as he rushed past them, his eyes dark with determination. Emily grabbed Sofia's hand and pulled her back into the safe room, closing the door and locking it behind them. The sounds of gunfire and shouting echoed down the hall, and Emily's heart raced in fear. Was this it? She held Sofia close, her heart pounding in her chest. "It's okay," she whispered, even though she wasn't sure if it was. "We'll be okay." The world outside seemed to implode, and Emily could feel the weight of everything pressing down on her. She didn't know how long it would take for the chaos to end, but she knew one thing. They had to make it through this. They had no choice. Time seemed to stretch on for hours, and Emily could feel every second dragging by, every sound from the hallway making her pulse race. But then it stopped. The sounds of gunfire faded, replaced by silence. Emily stood, frozen in place, holding Sofia close. She couldn't breathe. What had happened? Had they made it? The door to the safe room opened slowly, and Alessandro stepped inside, his face grim but intact. He looked at them for a moment, his eyes scanning the room. Then he nodded. "It's over," he said quietly. Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was short-lived. The damage had been done. The war had begun, and she knew now that they were all in this together, whether they liked it or not. "We're not done yet," Alessandro said, his voice low and full of determination. "But you're safe. For now." Emily didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. There was no going back. She had made a promise to Sofia to keep her safe, and no matter what came next, she would keep that promise. The world they were now a part of was dangerous, but Emily was ready to fight for their survival. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Immerse yourself in the captivating world of dark romance, where danger, passion, and betrayal intertwine in the most unexpected ways. Follow Emily, a woman who finds herself thrust into a life of peril after saving a Mafia boss's daughter. As the world around her becomes increasingly dangerous, she must navigate the treacherous waters of trust, survival, and love. Alessandro, the Mafia boss, is a man of power and control, yet there's something about him that keeps Emily both drawn to him and fearful of him. Their intense connection pushes both of them to the edge, making this dark romance story even more intriguing. But as they face escalating threats, Emily and Sofia are forced to stay hidden in the mansion, a gilded cage surrounded by enemies. As the danger grows, Emily realizes that her role in this dark romance is not just to protect Sofia, but also to survive the chaos Alessandro's world brings with it. With every twist and turn, Emily finds herself pulled deeper into this world she never asked for. Alessandro promises to protect them, but how much can she trust him in a world ruled by power and deceit? The tension builds, and the line between ally and enemy begins to blur, leaving Emily to question who she can really trust in this dark romance. As the final battle looms, Emily must decide how far she's willing to go to survive in a world where love and danger collide. Will they make it out unscathed, or will this dark romance lead them down an irreversible path? This story explores the complexities of relationships, loyalty, and the thin line between love and darkness, creating an unforgettable journey of survival, betrayal, and a passion that cannot be denied.